What's new, everybody? Dustin here, Jagged Brush Studios. Excited to be doing my first video as part of the Fifth Trooper Network. Figured I'd take these opportunities and the special videos I'm making for the Fifth Trooper Network to do some quick how-to hobby videos. I know there's a lot of questions that I see of people asking how to paint, how to do different things, and so my new goal here is to do short videos, bite-sized things that you can watch and learn how to take your hobby miniatures to the next level, be they Star Wars Legion, be they Warhammer, be they whatever you happen to use. These techniques that I'm going to talk about in these videos are going to work across multiple different formats. So today's first video is going to be all about basing. So I've got a few different bases here. I'm going to give you how I do 3 different style of bases for my miniatures. And they're the most common ones that I see across the different Star Wars Legion formats. So first things first is that your bases can be as intricate or as simple as you'd like to see. So the thing about basing is it's really important for many miniatures because they take things to the next level. So it really just adds a new dimension to your miniature and helps it really just kind of pop. Simple bases look fine. You can do a blank base if you would like. One of these, standard Star Wars Legion bases that I have here in my hands, glue your mini right on there. They look alright. But if you can figure out a way to just do something real simple to add that little bit of extra scenic touch, your miniature just looks that much better. Not to mention that it helps to take some of the focus off of your miniature if you have some imperfections. So I've got some real simple tips, and everything I'm going to use is going to be fairly inexpensive, but easy to get a hold of items. But I've got a few simple tips that I want to show you on how to make your bases real quick and easy. So the first one is one of my favorite products that I use for all of my bases is going to be this right here. I use it for just about everything that I do, and that's going to be Liquitex resin sand. There's all kinds of different technical things that you can get. I know GW has their own products. Army Painter doesn't make any technical basing stuff that I know of, but this is the one that I use for making all of my bases. It's a real, this one's getting close to empty, but it's kind of like a putty-like consistency, and it's got little resin beads in it that when it dries and you do a couple of the simple techniques that I'm going to teach you, makes your base look more natural. So yeah, we're going to start off with this. We're going to make the beginning steps of the first 2 bases that we're going to talk about today, which are going to be a forest base and a plains base. So the forest can double as a swamp, similar. It's just a matter of do you make it look wet or not. So we're going to do a forest base and kind of like an open plains base. So first things first, what we need to do is I've got a little container here. I've got my nice little plastic cheap putty knife you can get at any craft store around you. We're going to open this up. We're going to scoop out. It doesn't take very much. Scoop out some of this stuff, and the reason I like this stuff is that you can color it before you use it. So you can make it whatever color you want. And what I do for my coloring is I have just cheap craft store paint, whatever color you want. This is nutmeg brown. I buy it by the bulk container because I use it for terrain and all kinds of other stuff. But we're going to just go ahead and pour some of that right in there. Close this back up. And then just give this a stir. Mix, mix, mix. Get it good mixed up. Make sure you don't have any clear spots left. It's going to make it a little bit looser. And grab one of your bases here that you've got off to the side, and we're just going to kind of smooth that on the base with the putty knife. So the use of the putty knife, and I'm using an offset putty knife, makes it a little bit easier. If you get it on your fingers, it wipes right off. And you can make it smooth if you want. It will still dry with a little bit of a grit texture to it. You can take your putty knife and kind of pat it, and it will make peaks and valleys in there. but for these ones, this one I'm just going to smooth it on there real quick. So, simple, let it dry. It'll dry a little bit darker than what it looks on there. Set it off to the side. It's going to take a couple hours to dry, so what I recommend doing is go ahead and get your bases started drying before you start painting your miniatures, and set them off to the side. Once they're dry, they'll look somewhat like this. These are a different color, obviously, as I'm working on some Geonosis terrain, but once they're dry, it's like this. It's hard, you can touch it. It's got kind of a rubbery texture feel to it. And you can do whatever you want with it from there. So, example, like I said, of you can make these really any color that you would like. This, if you have these little, for lack of a better term, these are Jello shot containers. If you put a little lid on them, I've had this color that I've mixed up before last for like 4 months in one of these containers. So you can make a bunch if you want to do your entire army and get them spread across. So, but for this one, I'm just going to toss it because I won't need that color anymore right now. So the next step after you've got these dry, you can put it in front of a like a box fan, some kind of cooling fan, and it will dry fairly rapidly. But the next step is going to be applying a wash to them. So it really darkens it up. The wash that I use, as with most products that I use, are going to be Army Painter, and Army Painter Strong Tone is what I've done. And I had 2 of these done beforehand, and with the Liquitex resin sand, and then I washed them both, and we're gonna wait for those to dry up. They're getting there. Gonna drop one apparently. We're getting there. This one's almost done. This one's gonna take a little bit longer, but that's okay. We'll talk about one of the other things, the other base that I'm going to. So while those 2 dry, the next style of base that we're gonna work on also is going to be a desert base. I have a new technique that I've started using for them. You can always use this resin sand technique that I just taught you, but I want to give you a few options for things that you can do if you don't want to use the resin sand technique or you want something that's a little more subtle. This other one could be a good idea for you. So there's a product out there called, in the US it's a company called Quikrete that makes it, and it's a general construction sand, and it comes mixed, and it's got this little fine powdery stuff mixed with it, so you can get that. And then it also has some of these just a little bit larger rocks. And when you buy it, it comes in a 50-pound bag. It's around $5 US for a 50-pound bag. And if you ever manage to burn through a 50-pound bag of it, I'll make you an award if you burn through a 50-pound bag of it. But what I do is I buy this 50-pound bag, get a 5-gallon bucket, and I have a little hand sifter that I sift this out so it breaks down to the powder and then these separate rocks. And it makes for a real cheap basing material. And so we need to find a way to affix these to the base that we're going to use. And you have a couple options. You can use your standard PVA glue, Elmer's glue, this PVA glue, wood glue, any of those safe non-toxic school glues will work. For the sake of this video though, and for the sake of time, because those kind of things take longer, I'm just going to use standard super glue. And what we're going to start with is we're going to cover the space in super glue. And give it a good coat. Be careful putting this much super glue on, as sometimes the fumes will get to you. Cover that in a good coat. We're going to take my little basing thing here, grab just a little pinch of the rocks, and sprinkle it right on the base. Not that many. You don't want to overdo it with the larger texture rocks. And then after that, those rocks are there, we're going to take it into this powder and just go boop, and push it in there real quick. Pull it out, tap it off, blow it off so that there's no extra sand. Sorry for the blowing in the microphone if I did. Blow it all off. And you've got a base. I missed glue on a couple spots, but even paint it up, that's not going to look bad like that. It'll give it a nice texture. So, using the super glue, it dries almost instantly. And the nice thing about this stuff is once you've got it applied, it's real quick to start being able to work with it if you use the super glue. The super glue makes the larger rocks stick a little bit better, but PVA glue would work just fine. So what I've done is much like the last ones, I went ahead and pre-did one. So I've got one of these already done up, and I have pre-painted it tan. The nice thing about this method is you don't have to prime it first, just like the Liquitex resin sand. Because of the naturalness of the grit that we're using here, you don't have to prime it. This method of doing the basing is going to give you more of a natural look, and it's going to look more like natural grit sand. So I have taken, because I'm doing a desert base, I've taken an Army Painter Monster Brown. You can find an equivalent brown if you want to match these colors. And base coated it, just gave it a once over with one of my brushes, took a large brush, painted over it, and gave it some time to dry before we start working on the next step. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to continue working on this while our the swamp and the desert base, or excuse me, the swamp and the forest base are still drying. So the next step's going to be dry brushing up our sand. So this is going to be good for your desert planets, no matter what you're doing. If it's Star Wars, things like Tatooine, Jakku, anything like that. If you're doing other systems, I don't know what they're going to do. So we're going to go right here to the palette, and we're going to use a dry brush technique to dry brush on this Army Painter skeleton bone. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the dry brush technique, here's a free lesson on how to do it. I'll do a more in-depth dry brushing video later, but what we're going to do is you're going to take one of your ratty brushes. It can be as large or as small as you want. I've got dry brushes that are this big, and then I've got dry brushes that are that small. And the best way to find a dry brush is once you've worn out another brush that's nice and wide like this, then it's ready to be a dry brush. Or if you want to buy a cheapy dollar brush, buy it and take it and wear it down into something. You really want the bristles to be spread apart like that. The other place to get a really cheap brush is, believe it or not, in the makeup aisle at your local Mega Mart or whatever. And this was $2, I think. It's got some nice bristles on it for dry brushing, and it's $2, so I really don't care if it gets messed up. So when my wife was at the store the last time, I was with her. She needed to get a new one, and I said, you know what, I'm going to buy one of those also. So I bought one of these. This is the one I'm going to use for today's video. There's a long hair sticking out of this one, so I'm going to break it off. And for dry brushing, what you're going to do is you're going to go right here into this paint. You're going to get a little bit on your brush, take a paper towel, and you're going to rub it right on there until it almost looks like nothing's coming off. So you really want to make sure it looks like there's hardly anything coming off. And then on dry brush, we're going to take it over our base, and we're going to go in one direction. Don't go back and forth because you'll end up pushing it, so pull in one direction, and it may take quite a few passes. Just keep going. What's happening is you're depositing little bits of paint each time you pass it over. And do that until you get to the desired brightness. So I want just a little bit more paint because I want it to be a little bit brighter than what it is right now. Be careful you don't have any blobs on your brush, otherwise it will leave streaks. But keep doing it over and over and over. And I'm only pulling in one direction, so I'm only pulling this way, coming up, and then starting back on the other side. With practice, you'll get it to go faster, and dry brushing takes a little bit of practice. But pulling, keep pulling, and then what I will do is I'll turn it exactly 90 degrees, roughly, and then I'm going to go down from that direction. It won't take as much this other direction because you already deposited some on there. So, if you recall what it looked like a minute ago, now we've got a nice lighter color on there, but we're not quite done. The next step is going to be taking this mummy robes color. I don't know equivalents in the other painting, but let's shake this up a little bit. Put that in here. We won't need much because we're going to just do a light dry brush to bring some of that color up. Go in there, take most of it off on our brush here. again, we're going to just do some light dry brushing to hit some of the highest points. And ta-da. Nice, simple, desert-looking base is complete. Now that's a good starting point for our desert base, but let's add a couple things to spruce it up some. So clean my brush off real quick. And I'm not going to add much to it, but what I am going to add is going to be some grass tufts. You can get these in different brands. I happen to use the Army Painter ones. And we will pull one of these off. They come off easily. They are self-adhesive if you want to, but I like to add just a little touch of glue. It makes them stick a little bit better. There's all kinds of different styles that you can use of these and ways to make them work. So I'm going to use just a little bit of super glue and get that on there. Find a spot that I think it'll look alright and stick it right on our base there. This one that I'm using is the Highland Tuff. It's got some browns and greens mixed in there. And then if we were to, I don't have any miniatures to stick on there right now, but that would be a good base for one of our miniatures to start with. For an idea of what they look like on some of our bases. It's a desert look I was going for. I used a little bit different technique there, but there you are. So, simple, no fuss, easy way to make bases for desert. Alright, next up is going to be our forest base. Actually, I think this one will end up being the plain space. So, much like our other one, what I'm going to do is going to find a brown that I like. This time we're going to dry brush up to the monster brown. So we'll squeeze some of that off here. Because for the plains, it's going to be just a little bit lighter, so these are going to be like grass planets. I squeezed out much more paint than I intended to. But these will be your grass planets. You want to make sure your brush is good and dry, so if you've cleaned it like I did, make sure you got all the water out, otherwise it won't dry brush correctly. And onto our paper towel here, and then same thing as before, dry brush in one direction. Be careful not to cover too much, but the Liquitex resin sand dry brushes a little bit differently. Alright, and then last but not least, I want to take just a touch of the mummy robes and mix it with the monster brown to lighten it up just a little bit for some high level dry brushing of the highlights. We're going to cover most of this in a grass, so it's not a big deal. But here's the two compared next to each other, because the base should be about the same. Alright, so moving into what we're going to do for this one now. We're going to apply some grass to this one, and what I'm going to use is, we're going to apply a couple things to this one, but what I'm going to use to start with is this Battlefield field grass. You can get all kinds of different brands. Noct makes some. I think Citadel has their own, but the one I'm going to use is this Army Painter brand. And we will, again, use super glue. Normally I use PVA glue like I had mentioned, but we're going to apply some super glue in kind of just a semi-random fashion on how I want the grass to go. And I'm going to make this one look like it's got a little pathway running down the middle. And we'll use another product to add some of that to it. So, and then what I do is I grab a fingerful and then I pinch it and dab it on. Pinch it and dab it on. You will get super glue on your fingers this way. Not a big deal. And then what I like to do is once I've got it this way, is I like to blow on it. So I'm going to mute my mic while I blow on it, but what blowing on it from different angles does is it's going to help the grass stand up. So give me just a moment. Alright, so grass is applied. We don't need this grass for right now anymore. The next thing I'm going to do is I have some Battlefield Brown basing, which is like a grit basing that again is made by Army Painter. You could use sand for this. Woodland Scenics makes some, but I've been using this a lot lately. And what I will do is again grab a pinch and kind of sprinkle it on there. And it comes in different sizes, so you can kind of see what it looks like. It's pre-colored, lots of different grits in there, but let's add that, and it adds a nice little kind of pathway down the middle of that grass that we added. Alright, and then our last step on this is going to be to add another grass tuft or two. I might do two on this one. But what I'm going to use for these are these lowland shrubs. Since we're going for a plains, it kind of makes sense to have some little shrubs on there. And get my glue out. Set this off to the side for a moment. Get my glue out. Pull off one of the small. The nice thing about the Army Painters is they come with 3 different sizes. Put a little bit of glue on there. And find a spot where it looks natural to have a shrub. There. And I think I do want another one, so I'm going to grab another of the medium ones. And I think it makes sense to have it on this side right here. And there we are. Our little plain space is all finished. It's got a nice little grit, like a footpath down the middle, some 3-dimensional raised up stuff, which is going to help your basing look just that much better. Alright, so last but not least, before we call this a wrap, is going to be our forest base. So for our forest base, we're going to go for a little bit of a darker tone. We're going to go for an oak brown and give it a shake. I haven't used it in a while, so shake it up, get some into the palette. We will dry brush this onto there. It's not going to show up very much on this, but what we'll do next is we'll grab a little bit of the Monster Brown, mix it with our dry brush color here, and we'll dry brush with that next. Alright, clean my brush off real quick. And that's just a light dry brush. Like I said, the resin sand with the wash doesn't require a whole lot, especially because we're putting some grass on there. For the forest, I'm going to use a different shade of grass, which is going to be this Battlefield steppe grass. The grass does apply better with super glue or with PVA glue, so I'd recommend using that highly. And we're going to put some of this on there, just a couple of spots, and then grab my fingerful pinches and dab it on there. And then tap it off. And excuse me while I blow this off with, so I don't blind or deafen y'all. Alright, I am back. And if you notice, it's a lot darker. So for the woods, we want a darker grass. The next thing I'm going to do is, I've got these really specialized basing materials that I have that you can have too if you want them. They're really difficult to find, but in order to find them, you have to walk outside and go in your backyard or wherever you happen to, and literally just find some sticks. So I like to use natural basing materials in my my projects because they look natural. You don't have to do a whole lot of work for them. So we're going to take some super glue. We will find a nice spot to put this log right here. And stick it to my fingers apparently. Nice spot to put this log right here. We'll get that on there. last but not least, since we're going for a forest, I would like to add some broken up, crushed up leaves. And what that's going to do is add some natural ground cover to my base. So put a little bit more glue on there. And I found some leaves outside that I just crumpled up. And I'm going to take them and sprinkle them on. Touch them on with my tweezers. Get this put on there, like so. So you could go one more step, and I might, real quick, with another tuft. And I think the one I might use is these nice green tufts I have here. Oh, you know what? I'm not going to go for a tuft. I meant to say, let's go with some of this. It's called summer undergrowth. You can get this stuff at your local craft store also. It's just a lichen. They use it in the floral world. And we'll grab just a touch of it, and it's going to make it look like there's a nice moss or ferns or something like that. And we will put that right over here. And so I don't glue my fingers together, take my tweezers, and get that stuck on as it sticks to my tweezers. But hey, it's not hobbying if you don't glue yourself to it. And I glued myself to the base, but whatever. Alright. One woodland or swamp base done. Alright, so simple bases you can do yourself to make things look nice for your miniatures. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much for stopping on by. This is Dustin from Jagged Brush Studios. Glad, again, like I said, glad to be a part of the 5th Trooper Network. Hope you all enjoyed, and I look forward to the next time you see me. Have a good night, everyone.